One of the most important analytical techniques in chemistry and biology is the titration. In this experiment, we will use a solution of sodium hydroxide to titrate a sample of hydrochloric acid. This type of titration is called an acid-base titration. We will use an indicator to show when all of the acid has been neutralized by the base. At the end point of the titration, the indicator will change color. One of the most common indicators is phenolphthalein, which is clear in acidic solution and pink in basic solution. First, make sure that the burette is absolutely clean. Wash it thoroughly with detergent, rinse it several times with tap water, and finally rinse with distilled water. Before beginning the titration, you must rinse the burette with the solution you will be using. Close the stopcock and pour about 5 to 10 milliliters of the 0.1 molar sodium hydroxide solution into the burette. Tilt the burette and roll it around so that the entire inner wall comes into contact with the solution. Drain the rinse, then repeat this process several more times. Clamp the burette in the stand. Fill the burette with the titrant. Use a funnel when filling the burette to prevent spilling. Fill the burette until the meniscus is slightly above the zero mark. Then drain the solution until the meniscus is at or below the zero mark. Make certain that there are no air bubbles anywhere in the burette. If air bubbles are in the tip, drain a little more of the solution. If there are any air bubbles in the barrel, tap the burette gently. This is a 50 milliliter burette, which means it is graduated between 0 and 50 milliliters. Each major division is 1 milliliter. Each of the smaller divisions measures 0.1 milliliters. Between the smaller divisions, you can estimate the volume to the hundredths place. To read the burette, line up your eyes with the bottom of the meniscus. To make the meniscus easier to see, put a piece of paper with a heavy black line behind the burette. Since the volume can be estimated to the hundredths place, you should record this initial volume as 0.17 milliliters. Now we are ready to do the titration. In this experiment, we will be titrating a solution of hydrochloric acid to determine its molarity. Pipette a known volume of the acid into a clean Erlenmeyer flask. Here we are using a 25 milliliter sample of acid. The Erlenmeyer flask should be about 1/4 to 1/3 full. If it is not, add some distilled water. Add 2 to 3 drops of the indicator and mix well by swirling. If you are right-handed, use your left hand to control the stopcock and your right hand to swirl the flask. Turn the stopcock and let the titrant drain in about 1 milliliter at a time. Swirl well after each addition. If you splash any solution onto the sides of the flask, use some distilled water to rinse it down. You will notice that a pink color appears and then fades away as you swirl. When the pink color lasts longer before it fades, you are getting close to the end point. Start adding the titrant in smaller quantities, either by drops or even fractions of drops. You may add a fraction of a drop by touching the tip of the burette to the wall of the flask and rinsing it down with distilled water. You will need to proceed slowly at this point so as not to overshoot the end point. Sometimes it is easier to see the color change if you place a white piece of paper under the flask. Continue adding titrant by drops or fractions of drops until the pink color persists for 30 seconds or more. This faint pink color represents the end point of the titration. If the color is bright pink, you have added too much titrant and must start the titration over. Again, line up your eyes with the level of the meniscus and read the volume of the burette to the nearest hundredth of a milliliter. Record this as the final volume. The actual volume of titrant used will be the difference between the initial and final volumes. Let's review this process during the titration of a second sample. Refill the burette above the 0 mark and then drain the solution until the meniscus is at or below the 0 mark. Make sure that there are no air bubbles in the burette. Read the burette and record the initial volume. Pipette another sample of acid and add 2 to 3 drops of the indicator. Swirl the flask to mix. Open the stopcock and drain the titrant until you are close to the end point. Near the end point, add the titrant drop by drop or by fractions of drops. Rinse down the walls of the flask with distilled water as necessary. Keep adding titrant until a faint pink color persists for 30 seconds or more. Read the burette and record the final volume. To obtain the most precise results, you should repeat this titration on a third sample. This completes the video on titrations. Please rewind the tape and return it to the staff assistant.